Hello one, hello all, it's the gothiest ghost of them all. And list week continues. Yeah, we're still digging in the trash, but this will be the last trash digging that we do, because once we're out of the trash, we're gonna get into the treasure, and that will be best singles of 2024. Because we got past the worst singles. Oh, we got past the worst singles. Now we're getting into the worst albums, worst projects of 2024. And I say projects because not only are we touching on albums, but we're touching on mixtapes, EPs. And this year, like, a lot of great music was released. Countless albums that I was enamored with were released that I absolutely loved, and I pretty much avoided the ones that I had a feeling I was gonna hate. But with this list being the absolute worst albums of 2024, I wanted to make sure, I wanted to be absolutely sure that I did not skip any albums that should make the list. And I did not skip these albums. Well, at least not at least formally I missed them, but now I'm addressing them all here, so you're gonna see some albums on the list that I didn't review formally, but I wanted to touch on because they are that bad. So let's start it off. Number 10 on my list, I placed Meghan Trainor with Timeless, a record that really proves why the doo-wop revival mixed with pop is not a good combination and should die soon. Like, the gentrification of it needs to die and stay buried. And yes, this is one of the albums that I did not formally review, and I held off from listening to this. And when I finally did listen, I immediately regretted my decision, because when horrible, egregious, soulless, revival, doo-wop, pop, this is the first album that comes to mind. Like, I've seen people mention Taylor Swift. Granted, I'm not really a fan of her trajectory as of late, but God, like, I don't think she's dropped anything as horrible and as tasteless as this project here. Like, not only is this thing so derivative and tastelessly derivative of doo-wop and disco, but it's loaded with flavorless production, overproduced vocals, very self-obsessed, and this album really has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. There's even a song on here where I'm very sure she is ripping off Miley Cyrus Flowers. Like, it's a dead ringer for it, and I just can't ignore it. I can't ignore it. But yeah, it very well does rank pretty high in terms of worst pop albums of the year. But I wouldn't say it's the worst pop album of the year. If we're talking about the worst pop album of the year, I gotta go with number 9, Tones and I, Beautifully Ordinary. Essentially an overproduced, super bland pop album. And I get it, there are people who love Tones and I. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them. Like, I remember their first LP, which was their last LP. And I remember her first LP, which was her last LP, which I gave a big fat 0 to. And this was when I wasn't really reviewing albums via camera. I was basically writing them down on social media. Like, I thought the album was the equivalent of Goo Goo Gaga, bad, really terrible 2010 pop tropes, like just loaded with a bunch of annoying 2010 commercialized cliches, with a bunch of annoying, and I mean annoying, like grating, beyond grating vocals that were so infantile and insufferable. And this album here is just so soaked in reverb. Like, there's piano ballads here where I feel like it's supposed to be somber, but due to how touched up her vocals are here, due to how touched up the piano is and how drenched in reverb it is, It really does sap any emotion that any of these ballads were supposed to have. Like, it starts off very piano ballad heavy, and the songs just get progressively worse. Like, I feel like there's tracks on here that just take the most formulaic tropes of pop music and just slather them all over the place and just haphazardly put them together. Like, the engineer who engineered this, I don't know if he shares the same opinion I have of her voice, but if he does know how much of a torturous chore her voice is to listen to, then this man is a sadist, a fucking sadist. Like, I could just picture him in the studio going, is there any possible way I could make her voice more annoying? I got it. I'll just take her vocals and just sloppily stack a whole bunch of other vocal layers and add some unwanted effects on there and just modulate the hell out of them. That's a great idea. And I will admit though, there are moments in the beginning where I kind of do feel for her on the lyrical front, but due to how, like again, how drowned out and reverb her voice is, the instrumentation is, any compelling emotional potency is just stripped away. And I feel like once we get to the pop tracks, we've really crossed the threshold of annoyance. Especially like how grossly mixed this album is. Like how mixed her vocals are. Like, it's like the equivalent of a bunch of wailing babies just whining and screaming in my ear. Like the ballads are so soulless, so cleanly produced, just lacking human touch. And the poppier tracks are just unbearable and overly saccharine. And yes, I've heard talk of people not really taking pop music serious anymore, saying pop music is garbage now, which couldn't be any further from the truth. I mean, you got Charlie XCX, Chappell Roan, even Sabrina Carpenter, whose album I wasn't really too crazy about, but enjoyed some tracks from it. But if you were introduced to this, and this was the only thing currently you were listening to, I would completely understand. But I beg you, listen to Charlie, listen to Chappell Roan, because that is great pop music right there. This you want to avoid like the fucking plague. But if you enjoy it, if it uplifts you, if it makes you feel great, it's good. That's great. But for me, personally, I find it annoying. I find it a bloated mess. And it just really drags on. Like, the other one, as much as I hated it, it had a variety and a special kind of annoyance. This one is just like an endless abyss of just annoyance and boredom. That's what this album is. So it is ordinary by commercialized, overproduced pop standards. Beautifully though, not so much. At number 8 though, this is an EP I had to put on my list. Yes, it's an EP. I said projects. EP is a project. And I don't really think I should do like an EP list because I don't really know that many terrible EPs. And I'm not on a search for terrible EPs, I'm sorry. And this was an EP I was hoping to be at least tolerable, but expected the worst. And yeah, it's safe to say I got the worst. With MGK and Trippie Redd, Genre Sad Boy EP, which is a project with a title that is honestly so gross and misleading, very deceptive, because all this is lazy emo rap. That's all it is. With a lack of focus, lack of self-awareness. I feel like there's really nothing to sympathize with here. Like, there's very little chemistry. Like, it's just so low effort, a get out type project. Like, this was like a made for Spotify project. Because it's not a long project, it's only 27 minutes. But I feel like this thing is so devoid of a concept. Devoid of anything groundbreaking, devoid of anything interesting, devoid of anything compelling, and most of all, devoid of anything sad. And with a high profile artist like MGK, I mean, granted, almost everything he's put out is mid or trash, mostly trash. Trippie Redd, however, he has some good stuff. He has some good stuff. But I feel like this thing is just such a somber veneer, a somber facade. Like, it's such a poor attempt at trying to pull a feeling when there are definitely more emotional, open, compelling artists out there that deserve the ears, deserve the attention, like JPEG Mafia, Ka, rest in peace, Quadeca, Denzel Curry. Even Logic has stepped his game up, while MGK and Trippie are just floundering in fake despair. With gross lyrics, drab production, uninspired hooks, I feel like there's such a lack of everything you would want from an emo rap album. And granted, I'm not categorizing the artists who I've mentioned as emo rappers. We've heard that Denzel line. No, these are artists who are emotionally compelling. And Danny Brown. Danny Brown. And number 7 on my list is an EP I found pointless, adding another veneer of a different kind, another act of a different kind. Yes, I'm talking about 6ix9ine Blackballed, which is funny to me because on here he's not really breaking any new ground whatsoever. Like, he's really playing it safe to just hopping on what he's hopped on before. Same delivery that gets so tired. It's like, yeah, we get it. You're aggressive. But it really does fall into a place where I have to contextualize, where throughout a majority of the energy he's been putting out and what he's done, it just gets really tiring because we know it's an act. We know it's an act. We know you're not really that guy. And look, it's fine, but I feel like it would be more appreciative if he turned a new leaf here. And also, why is this called Blackballed when there's nothing on this fucking EP about being blackballed? Nothing. Like, there's no talk about how he snitched. There's no talk about what his life has been like after. It's just a really basic ass trap album with some drill in there and a really odd electronic song at the end that he barely fits on. Like, he is just so trapped stylistically, with the exception of the tracks I mentioned. But yeah, I really struggle to see the point of this EP. Like, he just has a severe lack of self-awareness. It's like all this faux aggressiveness, all the excitement he's once had is gone. It's non-existent now. Like, at first I found this guy to be really entertaining. I mean, not really entertaining. He was never one of my favorites, but I found him interesting to listen to. But now it's just the same thing over and over, and his bars got worse, like monstrously worse. Like, what the fuck is, she got that bubble double trouble, knowing we gon' fuck. She got that double trouble pussy humble girl, that big old butt. She got that Humpty Dumpty rock rumpy might run out of nut. God, yeah, like 6ix9ine has just reached a new level of trash, honestly. Like, I'd be vastly surprised if he still has fans. I really would. Because this just sounds so phoned in. It's just rage, and there's even some tracks where he's barely even on. If he wants to take this seriously, he needs to take a step back, look in the mirror, look for other producers, start venturing into other genres besides dance music and Jersey Club, and focus on being more self-aware and making good songs. Like, I'm not asking the guy to make anything deep or whatever, but make something at least catchy, at least memorable, something people want to listen to. And also the focus, topically, it's so non-existent, it's just trash, just throw it all away. At number 6 comes from a artist, a rapper, a singer, songwriter, I guess. One, people were so adamant about putting him on this pedestal, like he was the new big thing, like he was gonna be the white savior of hip-hop. Now, admittedly, this is just people who I hung around. I'm not sure if people actually in vast corners and vast movements and like vast populations actually took this guy seriously, actually thought of this guy as one of the GOATs. I hope not. But yeah, man, like, we're talking about Eazy-Freak Show. Like, this guy went from pop rapper to emo rap singer-songwriter, which was honestly so pathetic. And now we're back to another album that barely even has a concept, barely even has focus. Like, I've always found him to just be painfully average, and so annoyingly painfully average. Like, there's nothing groundbreaking about him lyrically or conceptually. Like, I've never heard anything from him that made me raise an eyebrow. I've never heard anything that's moved me emotionally from him. And I feel like this thing is supposed to have a concept, but it's so paper thin. Like, there's really no thematic element to this. Like, there's really nothing sturdy about this, like, except for this little, I guess, spoken word chant that's, I guess, kind of supposed to be Kendrick-like, but it's not by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I really feel like, okay, I could appreciate the concept of, you know, admitting you have a problem, admitting a sex addiction for G-Eazy, but there's nothing really compelling or thematically moving about this. Like, it's just him saying he has a problem, doing said problem, and then saying, yeah, I'm a Gemini, this is why. Isn't that crazy? Like, I'm bipolar, this is why. And God, I cannot forgive him for what he did to that Clash sample. I just can't. I just can't. And emotionally too, like, he's just so flat. He's not the best singer ever, and he tries to sing, but he can't. Like, I feel like what he tried to do, he tried to pull a Kendrick Lamar, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, but he just lacks everything that album had. Like, creativity, emotion, story, bars, stronger meaning. Like, it's just gonna be a very forgettable pop rap record that just tried to be unique, tried to put on this veneer of standout, and it didn't. Kind of like the NF record. Like, this is more of an NF record than it is a Kendrick record. I'm not saying he tried to go for it, but it feels like he did, and failed. At number 5 comes from a band, and it's crazy because, like, there are bands and artists from so many years ago, absolute legends, that have dropped amazing material this year, from Kim Gordon of Sonic Youth with her new LP, which is great. Beth Gibbons of Portishead, which dropped a fantastic LP, which is great, and I'll get into those. Like, even the Foo Fighters made a great comeback album last year. But this is one of those bands that I heard for the first time, and admittedly I was more of a believer back then. Like, now I'm not really so much. I mean, I think I've mentioned that before. I'm agnostic. I don't really have like a solid foundational belief in like a higher power. There could be, but honestly, I have no proof of that, but I have no proof there isn't. But I'm not going to dedicate and follow a movement or an idea based off of something I don't really know. I just try to live my life to the best, and I try to be the best person I can be, you know? But yeah, the more I listen to them, the more I'm like, wow, this is really just a really, like, at first they were just like, okay, like, you had like a few good songs, but then kind of just fell flat after a while. Like, it just got really dull to listen to. But now it's just so insufferable. These songs are just so insufferable. And I'm talking about Christian metal band Skillet with Revolution. Like, this is a band that really comes off disgustingly preachy, disgustingly pretentious, and I feel there's nothing they do sonically is unique. Like, honestly, I don't know how they've been in the game so long and have no identity whatsoever. Like, I really struggle to see, okay, you know what, I don't struggle to see because I kind of know who their audience are. I take that back. It's, it's these guys, yeah. Yeah, these guys here. But suppose you're not one of these guys and you're just a metal fan. I honestly struggle to see how you could understand what metal is, how it's supposed to be rebellious, how it's supposed to be scary, how it's supposed to be dangerous. But this here is just really safe. It's not dangerous at all. It's just bending the knee to tyranny. That's all this is. Like, they've just become like so unlistenable and so MAGA coded too, which becomes very apparent on All That Matters, which is just loaded with dog whistles talking about freedoms, trying to draw the narrative of Christianity being in trouble, Christianity being persecuted. Now, he's not wrong on the verge of freedom being taken away. I mean, yeah, that is true, unfortunately. Like with Roe v. Wade being overturned, trans rights being taken away, the livelihood and freedom of immigrants being taken away with the mass deportation, protesters being arrested, books that really serve a mass importance to Black history being burned, people being protested against the disgusting atrocities of what's going on in Gaza right now. But he's not speaking on those freedoms. No, he's speaking on the freedom of someone being arrested allegedly for speaking a Bible verse, which is so batshit crazy to me. Like, when this country is really on the verge of Christian nationalism and you're talking about your freedoms being taken away, and you're talking about not being controlled, but you're bending the knee and being so hell-bent on religion. Like, their whole career is just surrounded and dedicated to Christianity, which is fine, but let's be honest here. Like, you're not using this as a comfort. You're not using this as comfort. You're using this and weaponizing it. Let's be honest here. Not only that, but the production, the instrumentation sounds so grossly commercialized and overproduced. It sounds robotic. His voice sounds robotic. Like, this just has a so overproduced, gross commercial sound. Like, it sounds so overpriced, faux cinematic. Like, it feels like I'm about to be bombarded by this trailer I didn't ask for of this unvaxxed team of superheroes out to save Jan Sixers. Oh god, and the quality is so compressed. His vocals sound so disgustingly robotic and trying to be emotional. Like, they sound so strained, but they sound so processed at the same time. Like, they're just so obnoxious with abhorrent bullshit messaging. But yeah, terrible album. Terrible, terrible, terrible album. Wow, for a band called Skillet, they sure ain't cooking. At number 4 is a mixtape from a rapper I had absolutely no expectations of. Like, due to the fact that, like, I heard a couple songs going into it, and it just sounded to me like really bad Playboi Carti beat impersonations. Like, it really sounds like this is a mixtape they would make if they didn't care. Like, if they had no fucks to give whatsoever and they just wanted to put out a generic, basic ass trap drill album mixtape, they would have put this out. Like, it just leads to a super underwhelming experience. Like, I'm really thinking to myself that there's way more creative albums out there, or even a creative album like Yeat's album 2093. Excellent, creative, world-building, groundbreaking album for the rage genre. I mean, granted, I don't know if I would exactly call it rage, but it's definitely, like, in a way, like post-rage, I would say. Like, it's so futuristic, it sounds like an experience. But this, I don't know how this could come from someone who's rich, who's wealthy, and makes a cheap-ass mixtape like this with the most monotone, most deadpan vocals, with no personality. I will give him credit again for doing it solo dolo, but Jesus Christ, like, maybe he did need help on this. Maybe he did need a production team. Maybe he did need guest rappers on here to make this album decent, like semi-listenable, or maybe they could have steered him in the right direction. I don't know. It's just really poor Southern hip-hop, Chicago drill that's just given to another outsider who doesn't really have any love for the culture, just wants to mooch off of it and just wants to make a buck and move on, even though he's already rich. This whole thing is just a waste of time. It's just a waste of time. The beats barely slap. Like, the production just sounds so YouTube-like. Like, it's so scant. Like, it really does sound like somebody who's been listening to Lex Luger for a long time and just decided to make the most watered-down, basic-ass, scant-ass versions of that. That's what this sounds like. And then you just bring on a guy who sounds half asleep and unmotivated. Because just a bunch of flexing with a bunch of weak bars, a bunch of privileged-ass bars, too. Like, the lyrics are so underwhelming. Like, that run-through, like, Marshawn Lynch line. I mean, does he know what position he plays? It's like there's so low effort here. If I didn't say it before, I'll say it again. He's just another face in the trap rap cloud. That's it. And if I could say another nice thing about this, I'm glad this mixtape is short. Because it really does suck that bad. At number 3 on my list comes from an album I did not review formally, which is Lil Mabu, Young Genius. And my God, I really don't know what is so genius about this album. Like, let me give you a little backstory on Lil Mabu. Guy started off as a rapper making little funny songs, and they were pretty comedic, they were pretty fun, and then tried to do like this really deep route, and it backfired miserably, and now he's back just aching for attention. And starting off with going at Blueface, teaming up with his baby mother, Krishan Rock, and making one of the most cringiest songs I've probably ever heard, one of the most pettiest songs I've probably ever heard, one of the most obnoxious songs I've probably ever heard, that actually made my list of last year, with Mr. Take Ya Bitch, which again was a diss to Blueface, and God, it was just so bad, so bad. Not to say that Blueface hasn't gone a very cringe, problematic route, he definitely has, but I would rather listen to older Blueface, like some tracks from Blueface, than this garbage ass, so lacking self-awareness, so wannabe gangster album. Like, God, this reminds me. It reminds me of Malibu's Most Wanted. That's what this reminds me of. If Malibu's Most Wanted was more R-rated, more cringy, more racist. And honestly, it really baffles me because a lot of people have a lot of animosity for drill music as a whole. And in my opinion, your animosity, and I've seen animosity towards Sexy Red, who's not a drill artist, but definitely a lot of unnecessary hate towards her. All your hate, all your animosity should go towards this man's music. That's what it should go to, along with another rapper on this list, and a rapper, metal singer, gonna mention on the list. But if you're more in tune with drill as your target, this should be your most hated album of the year, because he does go the drill route, he does go the Jersey club route, and God, it's just so bad. Like, this thing just screams culture vulture, because this is loaded with one cringy bar after the next, one dumb topic after the next. Not to mention his track with 5Yo Foreign, where he kind of insinuates using the N-word, but like when he's about to say it, 5Yo says it, and he's like teaching him how to be like a drill artist and going about it at a very criminal way. Like teaching him how to be more of like a hitman. And there's also the god-awful problematic track with RT that deals in a lot of situations a child should not know about. Like, he's 5. And I see that like there's a lot of animosity towards people who get him involved in these situations that are very questionable, which should be called out. But if you're gonna call out that, fine, good, great. But also call out this clown here, because what he's doing is equally worse as what he's exposed to on other platforms. And there's also a song Like a Cop where he raps about being felt up by a cop and calls him a PDF, but he bribes the guy after he touched him inappropriately. And I'm like, is this how you deal with PDFs? You pay them off? Like, what's going on here? And then you're on a track with a child after, like, I mean, granted, he could be talking out of his ass, but still, like, I just don't find anything funny about this. Is unbearably unfunny. And look, Lil Dicky, as bad and terrible and trash and unfunny as he is, he certainly does have, like, some tolerable songs, but Jesus Christ, I would rather listen to Lil Dicky's Professional Rapper than this any day of the week. Any day of the week. And some of these tracks here come off just unfinished. And there's also tracks where he does this racist Middle Eastern accent. And not to mention a very unfunny and hideously auto-tuned rendition of Daniel Powter's Bad Day. And that song's bad enough. That song is trash enough. I don't know how you covered a terrible song and your version is worse. Like, how did you do that? How did you pull that off? Like, it's so socially unaware. It's so gross. Like, this is what happens when you let an outsider in who wants to exploit the culture. This is what happens when you bring an outsider in who knows nothing about the culture and gets in there and just exploits the very negative parts of it without contextualizing why exactly things are. Like, this is not groundbreaking. This is not genius. This is dumb. This is stupid. Like, if you could listen to this, and he could be tongue-in-cheek, sure, but even if that were the case, none of this is funny. None of it. It's annoying. It's obnoxious. And I don't know if he was going with irony here when he called it young genius. And honestly, I don't even know who his audience is. I mean, I would assume that, like, the only people that would take this seriously, that would actually bump this unironically and say this guy's the truth, this guy's a prophet, is sheltered white kids in the burbs who have no like connection to black people at all, or even heard a quality rap record. At number 2 on my list is another album that lacks severe self-awareness. And honestly, a track I wish I did not review alone, because God, this was torturous. This was bad. This was terrible. Like, this comes from a man, when it comes to reading the room, he's the most illiterate person on the planet. And a man who is so gassed up and carries so much gas with him that I'm surprised he didn't diss a fucking matchbook. Like, it comes from a trash-ass human being who is just so on his high horse. And if he was to fall off of his high horse, he would probably die, because that high horse is at plane level, at flight level. I'm talking about Falling in Reverse, Popular Monster. Now, if you're approaching this record without knowing Ronnie Radke's rap sheet, he has numerous allegations towards him. Like, sure, some were dismissed, some cases he won, some cases, like, he tested negative for. So I'm gonna say these are allegations, because I'm not trying to get sued here, because I know how much of a little bitch Ronnie Radke is, how much of a crybaby he is, and it's so hilarious to me how this man could talk about cancel culture, could talk about being canceled, talking about free speech being at danger, when you sue everyone who disagrees with you, when you sue people for criticizing your music, when you shut them down because of that. Like, this guy is a man baby. And here's the thing too, there are moments here that are true. Like, he did throw microphones in the crowd, like numerous microphones in the crowd, hit a little girl in the head, and also some really gross transphobic rants like this, and also doubling down with a racist comment. That's real. He said that. So when he talks about, oh, you're trying to cancel me for something I said 10 years ago, like, you're literally making yourself look bad, especially when you have a song that throws in people's face how trash of a person you are. So how are we supposed to believe you? And with all these allegations coming out and all these lawsuits you're pushing, like, how are we supposed to believe you? And then gaslighting us, saying like, oh, I'm the real truth teller, you guys are all sheep. It's very much pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And I know this is like a visual, but this should give you an idea of the type of person he is. Like, he's the type of guy that says, oh, I love everybody, man. I love everybody. I'm not racist. I love everybody. Oh, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. But yet your views are pretty conservative. And then you align yourself with one of the biggest pick-me idiots, Blair White, to prove you're not transphobic when she herself has made transphobic statements before. You're not fooling anybody. Like, I feel like this album proves how big of a piece of trash this man really is. And I've seen people criticize metal before where, like, people will be like, oh, how could you like that, man? It's just screaming. He's just yelling. It's just yelling. Well, in said person's defense, in this case, they're kind of right, because, like, in self-person's defense, if you were going to listen to this, I would have no trouble agreeing with you, because yes, all he's doing is yelling. There's like no conviction there. It just sounds like he's throwing a temper tantrum. Like, when it comes to screaming, there's an art to it. There's a visceralness to it. With him, it just sounds like he's throwing a tantrum. It just sounds like he's whining. It just sounds so insufferable, so obnoxious, so gross. Like, the delusions of this man is just so much at an all-time high. And sonically, this is nothing special either. He's choosing the most generic, most bland, most overproduced production. It just sounds so disgustingly sanitary. I don't know how you could claim to be such a hard ass, so rebellious, but yet you're standing for the system. You're standing for commercialism. Like, the production just sounds so generic, so robotic. Like, he chose a very cleanly produced record. It's very safe while doing computerized, touched up vocals. He needs to stop gaslighting his audience. Like, we don't need a man baby temper tantrum ass album. He doesn't need to worry about being canceled. He needs to worry, and he needs to focus on getting on his meds and getting a grip on reality. Speaking of no grip on reality, that brings me to the #1 spot, the worst album of 2024. I'm talking about Kanye West, Ty Dolla $ign, Vultures 2. Now, I didn't, again, review the first Vultures record. I put a video out saying how trash it was, but not exactly reviewing it because there's really nothing to review. To be fair, this album is still gross. I mean, it's not as badly produced as Vultures, but it's almost equally bad. Maybe lesser. Like, there's lesser anti-Semitism here. It's still there. Don't get me wrong. Like, you do have some very questionable bars here, or the premise of this where he's really pulling an Eminem and not apologizing for anything, trying to make himself look holier than thou, when you've literally, like, again, dissed Adidas, who dropped you for being anti-Semitic. So that's one thing. Another thing is taking numerous shots at your ex that you've harassed countless times. Now, don't get me wrong, I have my criticisms of Kim Kardashian, but she's still a human being. And what's gross is how you're trying to portray yourself to be like this truth teller, this hero, when you've just said nonsensical bullshit. You've just admitted to how crazy you are with the Holocaust denial, with saying Jewish people have this cabal that's controlling all media, and then claiming you're a Nazi, saying you love Hitler. And on top of that, this is no direction whatsoever. The lyrics are so effortless and absolutely just, what the fuck? Like, he really phoned it in. And it's funny to me because this album, I'm kind of not alone on this one, because even his fans didn't like this. So I feel like Kanye's losing it, man. He's really lost it. He's not the man we've gave accolades to in the past. Like, his early discog, great. But man, he has truly fallen from grace here. And he also has this song where he's dissing artists that are on the album. This is just a bipolar nightmare devoid of all self-awareness. And I say that a lot, but I'm not lying to you. There is massive self-awareness lacking in all these albums I've chosen. So that's not a stretch. I'm not being repetitive. I'm just speaking from the heart here. And I don't know how you've managed to pull off where your features are better, where your features are outshining you left and right. On top of that too, like, his voice, his rapping style, like, he does not sound with it a majority of the time. And he still does that very annoying Elmo voice, like, maybe not as much, but there are some songs where that does pop in and out. But yeah, like, I'm just at a loss for words at how deep this man has fallen, how right now we are really seeing the decline of Kanye, and a side of him that really leads to a shell of who he once was. And yeah, and on top of that too, like, the song structure, there's barely any song structure. Like it's very unconventional, but yet it doesn't have much of a direction. There's no surprises. There's nothing unique or interesting on this. And that gross ass line at the end asking, like, going to heaven, asking, is there a place for the Jews or the Gentiles? Like, I don't know. Like at this point, I pretty much said almost everything that could be said, like, along with some other gross lines here where he doesn't even sound like he's trying. He doesn't. And you would think that this would be a you would think that through all this, there would be a learning experience, but there's no learning with Kanye. He's turned into a trash human being, very, very unhinged, unself-aware human being. And he's just getting progressively worse. And yeah, that's Vultures too. Hope Ty got that check he was hoping for. And those are the worst albums of 2024, in my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me. I find it questionable if you do. I find it very questionable and sus if you do. Just so you know, based off the landscape, the premise of these albums. But yeah, for those who were actually listening, for those who actually do love music and enjoy music and look for great music, that list is coming. Hopefully there's more to come next year. For those who are having an absolutely shitty start of the year, or have had a very shitty year prior to this one, I get it. Trust me, we're in really fucked up times right now, but it's gonna be a rough ride. And for what it's worth, I know I'm just some guy with a YouTube channel, but I'm here for you as well. But yeah, next is great songs of 2024. Stay tuned for that. Till then, Caspa, Gothic Ghost, worst singles of 2024. Till we meet again.